Welcome to the new video seminary. Here is Dr. Hoffman. Subscribe and give me likes. Let's start now. International factor movements. So far, we have assumed that factors of production, such as labor and capital, are mobile within a country. This means that labor and capital could move freely among countries, industries as the industries expanded or contracted. This movement of labor and capital occurs automatically in a country as the resources seek their best rate of return. We also assumed that the factors of production are immobile between countries. This assumption practically defines international trade theory. If both labor and capital could easily migrate across national borders, then the study of international economics would be indistinguishable from the study of economics of countries' regions. However, international economics differs from economics, regional economics. A country's laws and regulations concerning the buying and selling of foreign currency may restrict the movement of portfolio capital. National laws restricting foreign ownership may restrict the ability of foreign firms to invest in plant and equipment in a particular country. Such restrictions can be important as they make it difficult to invest resources where they can earn the highest rate of return. The movement of labor from one country to another, or immigration, is a much debated political issue. In this video seminary, you will learn that there are valid economic reasons why the immigration of labor is so contentious. We begin this lesson by discussing international trade and the mobility of factors of production. Then we examine the international mobility of capital and labor. Because multinational corporations, MNCs, are responsible for some of the movements of labor and capital, the final part of this chapter discusses the nature of MNCs and how they are regulated. What is the difference between international trade versus international factor movements? You know that inter-industry trade based on the factor proportions theory occurs between countries because the factors of production are not mobile from one country to another. The movements of the factors of production from one region of a country to another are similar to factor price equalization that we discussed in previous lessons. To a large extent, international trade is a substitute for the movement of the factors of production between countries. In many cases where the mobility of the factors of production is blocked, international trade is the next best option. International trade is considered a second best alternative because moving the factors of production between countries maximizes world output. For example, if capital and labor could both earn a higher rate of return by moving to another country, then blocking that movement means those resources are used in a less productive way. This implies that there is an opportunity cost associated with making resources immobile between countries. The result is that this immobility reduces the potential output of the world economy. In the other question, we explain capital flows and the terms source and host country. Capital flows It means there is a flow of foreign assets into a country or the flow of a country's assets abroad. There is also the welfare effect of capital flows. First, consider the effect of foreign direct investment on the source country. It is the country where the capital originates, the country that sends the factor of production to another country. As capital moves out of the source country to the foreign country, the supply of capital decreases in the source country. This reduction in the supply of capital causes an increase in the rate of return to capital in the source country, and the owners of capital in the source country benefit. The owners of the capital that is moved from the source country to the foreign country also benefit, as the capital invested in the foreign country earns a higher rate of return than it would have earned if it had remained in the source country. As a result, the overall return to capital in the source country rises. The effects in host country, it is the country receiving the capital, the country that receives the factor of production from another country, are reverse. The return to capital in the host country will decrease as the domestic supply of capital is increased with FDI flows. As capital migrates to the host country, labor within the host country benefits from the increased amount of capital per worker, which increases the productivity of labor in the host country. The return to labor, wages, increases, and the welfare of the labor force increases too. These effects are similar to the effects that international trade has on a country's factor prices and its distribution of income. If a country has abundant labor and scarce capital, the opening of trade results in an increase in wages and a decrease in the return to capital. As before, the scarce factor capital loses relative to the abundant factor labor. These welfare effects on the factors of production reinforce the notion that international trade and the international movements of factors of production are substitutes. In the next question, we see that capital movements are also joined to public policy. Explain industrial policy. Industrial policy is a government policy designed to stimulate the development and growth of an industry. It tends to favor local firms at the expense of foreign firms. A country's industrial policy refers to the many ways in which government tax policy, direct subsidies, or trade policies affect the development of business within a country. Question 4. What are the reasons for the international movement of labor? Our discussion of immigration is concerned with the motives and effects of immigrants who voluntarily leave one country to enter another. Every year people move from one country to another for reasons not totally related to economics. Some individuals are forced to move from their home countries as a result of war, revolutions, natural disasters, or ethnic or religious persecution. These forced immigrants are not included in our discussion. We speak about voluntary migration generally occurs for economic reasons. As a result, this labor movement between countries is much like the movement of capital we discussed in the last part of our lesson. The source countries that labor tends to leave are predominantly developing countries. Both poverty and unemployment are considered push factors that lead to immigration. These push factors would not be very important if the distribution of income among the world's economies were evenly distributed. However, approximately 81% of the world's output and income originates in 45 countries, with less than 16% of the world's population. The high incomes in these countries create a pull factor. Labor from developing countries can improve their standard of living by moving to a developed country where the standard of living is higher. Likewise, workers from low-income countries may seek to migrate to a middle-income country. For a worker in a low-income country, the standard of living in a middle-income country may seem affluent. Combining the push factors of poverty and unemployment in developing countries together with the pull factor of higher wages and higher standard of living in developed countries creates an environment conducive to the migration of labor. Neither the push factors nor the pull factors by themselves are sufficient to induce labor to move from their home country to a foreign country. Both groups of factors need to be present for migration to occur. In question 5, mention the importance of public policy related to immigration. Immigration policy is a persistent political problem in many developed countries as they try to balance the impact that immigration has on wages within their countries with the total output their countries produce. An immigration policy designed to maximize a country's total output would be a policy of completely open immigration. In this case, a country's output would be maximized, but labor's economic interest, wages, may be harmed. This is why few countries have a totally open immigration policy. On the other hand, few countries have a complete ban on immigration. Restricting immigration to zero would result in a high opportunity cost, in that the absence of immigration would result in lost output. Although completely open immigration or restricting immigration to zero is not likely, some sort of political process would have to shape a government's immigration policy. In this case, the government must balance the welfare of society versus the welfare of particular groups that immigration affects. However, both economic and political factors change over time, and so immigration policies, especially in developed countries, are prone to changes over time. In question 6, explain brain drain. Brain drain is the movement of skilled or professional workers from one country to another. Brain drain alludes to a highly skilled and trained professionals migrating from developing countries to developed countries. In recent years, there has been migration of skilled workers from the former Soviet Union and the Eastern European countries to Western Europe and other OECD countries. This type of migration creates a complicated mix of economic gains and losses. There are winners and losers in this brain drain. The migrants and the developed countries gain because better wages and working conditions in the richer industrialized nations foster migration. In some areas, such as the hard sciences or medicine, the working conditions in developed countries are also a lure, as some of what these scientists wish to accomplish is simply impossible in their home country due to lack of money and equipment. The world economy as a whole gains from this migration, as the productivity of these migrants is higher in the industrialized countries, and potentially new products and processes may be discovered that would not have occurred without the migration. An example is the low-fat potato chip. A Nigerian scientist who had immigrated to the US discovered this exceptionally important process. The losers are the developing countries. These countries have invested in the initial training of these workers. If these workers migrate, the country faces the loss of the investment because educational resources are scarce in developing countries. A common proposal to mitigate this loss is a tax on immigrants, a tax that developing countries can't collect and the developed countries don't want to impose. In many cases, though, the migration is not a total loss for the developing country. High-income workers having moved to developed countries may remit money home to support relatives. In this case, the developing country has recouped some of the loss, and if the wage differential is high enough, it may be such that a fraction of the migrants' earnings remitted may cover the entire initial investment. In the next question, you should explain multinational corporations' influence, importance. Up to now, we have been considering the international movements of the factors of production between countries. Much of the movement of capital and labor in the world economy occurs as a result of the activities of multinational corporations, MNCs. Labor shortages in one country may induce firms to recruit labor from another country, or the firm may decline to move workers from one country to another to address the shortage. In addition, the activities of multinational corporations are the primary determinant of international movements of capital or foreign direct investment, FDIs. The most fundamental question concerning multinational corporations is why they exist. They exist because they are efficient. Large multinational firms derive these efficiencies from internationalizing certain activities, as opposed to contracting them out to a second party. Among other things, managing a firm involves deciding which activities the firm will carry out itself and which activities will be contracted out to firms or individuals external to the firm. Aside from this fundamental issue, a firm may decide to operate business units outside the home country for reasons related to the firm's business specialization. In this section, we first consider the importance of MNCs in the world economy. MNCs are sometimes the subject of controversy in the world economy, so we will see there are reasons for this controversy. First, consider the relative importance of MNCs in the world economy by examining the data of exports and imports and influence on world GDP. There are given trends. There must be some underlying reasons why MNCs are growing so quickly. So let's see. Many large firms find it necessary to be horizontally or vertically integrated. With both horizontal and vertical integration, firms may find it profitable to set up business units in other countries to service their customers more efficiently or to reduce costs. Firms that sell goods and services in foreign countries, or firms that produce goods in foreign countries for sale domestically, must decide how they want to control their assets in the foreign country. There are several alternative modes of foreign investment. The main choices include: the firm can export its product to a foreign firm and let the foreign firm handle all aspects of selling it in the foreign market. The multinational corporation may set up a wholly owned subsidiary to serve a foreign market. In this type of subsidiary, the firm has complete control from the production of the product or service to the end sale and service to the ultimate consumer. And thirdly, they can establish joint ventures with a firm in the foreign market. The potential types of joint ventures are too numerous to mention here. The firm may need to operate in a foreign country to obtain raw materials not available in the home market. Increasingly, multinational corporations are choosing to manufacture subcomponents in foreign markets to reduce overall production costs. In question 9, we'll explain OLI approach and licensing agreement. The OLI approach is a framework that explains why multinational corporations engage in foreign direct investment. The O in OLI stands for ownership, commonly ownership of an intangible asset. The intangible asset is a good or process that a firm has developed that competing firms find difficult to replicate. Usually it is valuable because it is a source of considerably competitive advantage. The firm may believe that maintaining control over this asset makes it necessary to set up subsidiaries in foreign markets rather than relinquish control over the production and distribution of the product. The ownership of intangible assets relates to the issue of technology transfer. When a firm owns a technology that can be profitably employed or sold in a foreign market, the simplest and in the short run most profitable option is to license the technology to a foreign firm. This licensing agreement immediately increases the domestic firm's profits because the marginal cost of obtaining this extra revenue is usually quite low. However, such an agreement may allow a foreign firm to gain access to the technology and potentially become a competitor at a later date. To prevent this from happening, the domestic firm may feel it necessary to serve the foreign market in some other fashion. L in the OLI framework represents locational advantages. In some cases, it may be in the firm's global interest to locate outside the home country. This may occur for a number of reasons. The location of natural resources is an obvious example. Less obvious is the firm's motive to take advantage of cheaper foreign inputs in a vertically integrated production process. Usually this involves multinational corporations moving part of the production process to developing countries to take advantage of cheaper labor or raw materials in the production of components for more sophisticated products. Likewise, horizontal integration in an industry may induce firms to set up subsidiaries to more profitably serve foreign markets. In addition, various natural and legal barriers to trade may induce firms to locate in foreign markets that might not otherwise exist. And finally, I in the OLI framework represents internationalization. Internationalization refers to firms' propensity to perform functions internally that outside firms could do. In this case, the firm derives some benefits from internalizing production as opposed to allowing other firms to participate to one extent or another in producing the product. The OLI approach provides a useful way of thinking about the activities of multinational corporations. Most of the time, one or more of these three factors can explain the activities of a firm in foreign markets. In question 10, we'll mention the importance of public policy related to multinational corporations. Final issue concerning multinationals is how they are regulated. Every national government regulates business within its borders. Multinational firms potentially pose a unique situation in that they operate in foreign countries, the host country, but to a greater or lesser extent they are managed from the home, source country. In general, there are two public policy issues. The first issue is how multinational corporations are regulated in the host country. The second issue is how both the home and the host country tax multinational corporations. A host country's treatment of multinational corporations can vary considerably. At one extreme, the host country could ban the activities of multinational corporations. On the other extreme, the host country could treat the multinational corporation as though they were a domestic firm without making legal or regulatory distinctions between domestic firms and foreign-owned firms. This situation is called national treatment. Alternatively, a host country could treat multinational corporations somewhere in between these two extremes. National treatment is the most desirable situation for a multinational corporation, as market forces would determine foreign direct investment flows without being either hindered or induced in one way or another. There are many possibilities between these two extremes. In most countries, including the United States, there are restrictions on the activities of foreign-owned firms in at least a few industries: national defense, transportation, telecommunications, and three industries that commonly include restrictions on the activities of foreign companies. In addition, countries may choose to put any number of restrictions on multinational corporations' ability to operate in the host country. Such restrictions may include the percentage of the industry that foreign firms can own, the percentage of the firm's output that must be exported, and the firm's ability to repatriate profits. The point here is that, for a number of reasons, most countries choose to treat foreign-owned firms differently than they treat domestic firms. In the last 11th question, explain transfer pricing. Transfer pricing is the overpricing or underpricing of goods in intra-firm trade or multinational corporations that is designed to shift profits from high-tax to low-tax countries. Initially, transfer pricing was used to transfer profits out of countries with exchange controls. Unless countries adopt similar income tax rates, at least some transfer pricing by multinational corporations to lower their total tax liability will continue to occur. In the last part of our lesson, we summarize the main points learned and taught. Firstly, in many ways, the movement of the factors of production between countries is a substitute for international trade in goods. Secondly, more than 90% of foreign direct investment, FDI, originates in developed countries. 21% of the world's foreign direct investment goes to developing countries, and approximately 3/4 of the world's foreign direct investment flows to developed countries. Thirdly, the international movement of capital can occur for a variety of reasons. Foreign direct investment represents the capital flow between countries to purchase land, structures, and equipment and software. This investment usually is in the form of a domestic corporation opening, a foreign subsidiary, or buying control of an existing foreign firm. Number 4. The owners of capital in the source country benefit from capital flows, and the effect on labor in the source country is negative. Organized labor in the US has almost always opposed the investment of US capital in plant and equipment in other countries. The effects on the country receiving the capital are the reverse. 5. One of the most controversial areas in international economies and public policy is immigration. The international migration of labor usually is an economic phenomenon that pushes workers out of low-wage countries and pulls them into high-wage countries. For the country, point 6, losing immigrants. Immigration benefits the workers left behind. For the country gaining the immigrants, immigration may lower the return to existing labor within the country, but it augments the country's total output. 7. Countries have been able to design policies that allow market forces to allocate labor efficiently on a global basis in a way that seems compatible with public preferences on immigration. Examples of this are the guest workers programs of Europe and the offshore assembly provisions of the US. More recently, improved communications have made it possible to move certain services to foreign countries. Number 8. A multinational corporation, MNC, is a firm that conducts part of its business across national boundaries. A firm may decide to form subsidiary business units outside the home country for reasons related to a firm's business specialty. Point 9. MNCs become multinationals in order to maintain ownership of an intangible asset, to obtain locational advantages, or to internationalize certain aspects of the business. Last but not least, number 10. There are two major public policy issues concerning multinationals. First, how are the multinational corporations regulated in the host country? And second, how do both the home and the host country tax multinational corporations?
At the end, there is just to say subscribe and give me likes. See you soon!